Well, many thanks indeed for staying with us. This is Business News, and here are some of the stories we're tracking for you at this time. Amid the attacks on Ukraine, Nigeria has increased its imports from Russia by 143.21% in 1 year. That's according to the latest foreign trade report from the National Bureau of Statistics for the second quarter of 2022. The NBS in its report shows that the total imports from Russia hit 21.84 billion naira in Q2 2022, a massive increase from the 8.98 billion naira in Q1 2022. The first quarter of this year, Nigeria imported 6.27 billion herrings and a 2.77 billion naira blue whiting from Russia, while by Q2 2022, the country imported 13.39 billion naira blue whitings, 7.21 billion naira herrings and 1.25 billion naira malt. This increase is against the prediction that Nigeria's imports from Russia might be at risk with the ongoing war in Ukraine. To other stories now, extortion, harassment and multiple charges from the aviation and other agencies at the airport are causing Nigeria's yearly revenue loss of over $250 million. The huge revenue would have accrued from deepening participation in the nation's air freighting of agro-cargo export produce. The Director General and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian Export Processing Zone Authority, Professor Adesoji Adesuba, said this in a paper he presented here in Lagos over the weekend. Professor Adesuba said government agencies at the airports erected many obstacles which constitute a disservice to the export and imports of agro-cargo produce in the country. He said until these hurdles are crossed, government efforts to attract more revenue into the gross domestic product, GDP, will not materialize. And scientists and farmers have opposed the proposed amendment of the NBMA Act 2015. They made this known at a public hearing by the Senate Committee on Environment on the proposed amendment in the nation's capital, Abuja. Lara Afolayo tells us more in this report.
A public hearing by the Senate Committee on Environment on the proposed amendment of the NBMA Act 2015. Scientists oppose amendments of the Act as they believe including certain clauses into the legislation will affect efforts at promoting the use of biotechnology in the country.
Recently, Mr. President has assented to the bill of the National Biotechnology Development Agency, which is an indication that the country has already known the importance of this technology to the nation.
The committee listens with rapt attention at the different arguments made to prevent the proposed amendment of the legislation.
The submissions already here, I can see the fireworks is already on whether there is need for this amendment or not, which is the essence of public hearing, to have the feelers and then guide ourselves accordingly so that we can take appropriate legislative action.
The scientists say those seeking the bill's amendment are not doing it in national interest.
The proposed amendment being sought, for example, board composition, timelines, penalties, substituting may with shall, etc., will in no way contribute to the achievements of the goals of the existing Act, as increasing safety to human and animal health, no conservation of biodiversity.
Other scientists and farmers at the hearing also share thoughts against the bill's amendment.
This technology, having been acknowledged for its potentials worldwide, including advanced countries, means that has the potential to improve our economy. As being proposed for the amendment seeks to substantially to undo the exploitation of this very important arm of science. Normally, you spray about 8 times. But with this product, I was only forced to spray twice. And it was resistant to drought. And its productivity was high.
Sponsors of the bill seeking amendment of the NBMA Act were absent at the hearing. Lara Afolayo, TVC News, Abuja.
Let's shift our focus now outside Nigeria's Asian share markets rallied today on hopes a key reading on U.S. inflation will show some cooling, while the U.S. dollar was restrained by the risk of higher European interest rates and Japanese intervention. MSCI's Brothers Index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan added 0.5%, having bounced modestly from a two-year low hit last week, while Japan's Nikkei added another 1.1% after rallying 2% last week. And Chinese blue chips firmed at 1.3% ahead of retail and industry data due later in the week that may show some improvement in the August after a disappointing July. And Wall Street struggled to extend Friday's bounce, with S&P 500 futures and Nasdaq futures stay flat, while Eurostoxx 50 futures gained 0.6% and FTSE futures at 0.2%. Meanwhile, Britain's economy grew by less than expected in July, raising the risk that it is already in recession, with the sharp climb in energy tariffs hurting demand for electricity and a leap in the cost of materials hitting the construction sector. With inflation at a 40-year high of more than 10%, gross domestic product expanded by 0.2% from June, recording a weaker than a median forecast of 0.4%. In August, the Bank of England forecast a recession for the world's fifth biggest economy, lasting from the end of 2022 until early 2024, due in large part to the hit to living standards from energy prices pushed up by the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, economists suggest that the economy might be on course to shrink in the July-September period, having contracted by 0.1% in the April-June quarter. And global geopolitical tensions, high inflation, and climate change have increased demand for risk protection and will lead to a rise in premiums. That's according to the stance of leading reinsurers at the industry's annual meeting in Monte Carlo. They projected that interest rates could rise by 10% or more in some markets amid high inflation, a development that is likely to increase global insurance premiums in recent years as they face higher claims. Meanwhile, industry leader the Swiss Re Institute expects $33 billion in commercial premiums to be generated over the period 2022 to 2026 as companies move their supply chains closer to their home countries, going by the unabated Russia and Ukraine crisis. And to wrap things off, oil prices on the international market rose today as Iranian nuclear talks appeared to hit obstacles and an embargo on Russian oil shipments loomed, with tight supply struggling to meet still robust demands. A U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude now sells at $87.68 per barrel, with an upward price margin of 1.03%. Brent crude offers $93.94 per barrel, with an uptick review of 1.18%. And Bonnie Light now sells at $93.17 per barrel, with a price surge of 2.76% for the OPEC basket. Crude oil still remains static, still selling at $95.96 per barrel, with a price decline of 3.89%.